and welcome everyone. We've just opened up the waiting room. I can see people connecting to audio. I can see people's videos turning on. So good to have you today. It's a lovely Tuesday morning, I'm going to say. I'm going to take a stab at that. Hope your week's going well. Good to have you here today. We'll get started shortly. We'll give some time for people to join in. As we do that though, if you want to, we have like some an icebreaker question today. You might not know, or maybe you do. Friday, the 5th of November. I'm struggling with days here today. The 5th of November is International Volunteer Managers Day. We want to recognize our volunteer managers. We want to ask you, and this is kind of bit of a get to know you question, bit of an icebreaker question as we let people in. What makes you feel appreciated in your role? One of the key themes that we'll be talking about in volunteer management today is creating person-centered experiences and thinking about what your volunteers want out of the experience and building it around that. We'd love to know what makes you feel appreciated in your role, particularly as we think about what can we do for our volunteer managers as part of International Volunteer Managers Day. We'd love to hear your answers. What makes you feel appreciated in your role? Is it a nice certificate, a shout out on social media? Some people don't like social media shout outs. So that's one of the things with the recognition. Sometimes the way you want to recognize people isn't the way people want to be recognized. Anyways, we want to ask a question. Feel free to jot it down on the Slido. That'll be open now for a couple of minutes while we let people in. If you've joined us in the past minute or so, welcome. Good to see you here today. Here we go. Being treated like an expert, being included in decision making, huge one. Particularly, how do you as a volunteer manager feel seen and appreciated by your leadership team? That's a huge one. Celebrating the wins, particularly in for-purpose and low resource organizations. We work so hard. We're working towards a clear purpose. So if we get to celebrate our wins, so good to just acknowledge them and celebrate them with the broader team as well. I love it. For those who have just joined in, we're just answering a bit of an icebreaker question. Welcome, good to see you here. Being nominated for winning awards. Yes, the volunteer awards are great. Just seeing volunteers having a good time. That's reward in itself. I love it. Certificates, social media shout outs, professional development in the volunteer manager space. It's hard to find. How do we provide good professional development to those in volunteer manager roles? Excellent. I'm loving these answers. Thank you so much, everyone. It's 11:03, so we're going to leave it there so you can keep answering if you've got something, but I'm going to move on and kick off our event shortly. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and welcome to Volunteer Management Power Up. This one is specifically on engaging student volunteers. If you're here, I hope you're interested and excited to talk about what it's like to engage student volunteers. My name's Will. I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at Community. I'll be joined by Jana and Alex, and they'll have chances to introduce them throughout the session. I might even spotlight myself and Jana for these segments. I don't know how you're viewing. You can view it in gallery mode so you can see everyone else here, or you can just look at myself and Jana as we talk through the slides. But welcome. I'd like to start, of course, by acknowledging the land that I'm joining us from. So I'm on Darug country at the moment, and I'd like to pay my respects to the Darug people and acknowledge that they are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd love to acknowledge elders past and present, and that they've been sharing stories and knowledge on this land long before we started running webinars online like this. I'd like to extend that to wherever you're joining from across the country. feel free to pop it in the chat. If you know the Indigenous lands that you're joining on, we'd love to see them in the chats. Good to see you here. Today, volunteer management power up, it's not the second in a sequence. If you've been with us before, you might have heard of volunteer management essentials. That's one of our favorite training sessions to run for volunteer managers. We talk all things essentials in terms of recognition, retention, and engagement of volunteers, the kind of key pillars of what it looks like to manage volunteers. That's one of our key sessions. We'll run that throughout the year. What we're trying to do today with power ups, and what we'll do with power ups in the future, is target particular areas of volunteer management that we think deserve their own 1 hour segment. We would often get questions about student volunteering in other events, and we thought we can't cover this all in a 5-minute Q&A. We want to run a whole session on it. So we'll be running power ups throughout the year. Obviously not this year because it's almost the end of the year. Who can believe that? But next year we'll be running a series of power up sessions based on the key questions that you have and what we want to be thinking about in the volunteer management sector. But we're excited. As I mentioned today, you've got myself, we have Jana. I don't know, Jana, do you want to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Jana and I'm the the community engagement coordinator for VIOs, volunteer involving organizations. And yeah, I'll be chatting through a few of the points that we have up here on the agenda with Will today. So hello, thank you for being here.
Awesome. Jana and I are half of the community engagement team at Community. We're the team that works with our volunteers and our charities and social enterprises to help find and engage with volunteers. It's an awesome job. We get to meet lots of incredible people. We should add that Jana is a fully certified student volunteer. She's still studying part-time as she works with us. So you're getting it direct from the source today, people. Someone else will be getting information directly from the source is Alex Connor. Alex Connor, do you want to come off mute and give yourself a quick introduction as well?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Alex. I'm delighted to see you all here and see some familiar faces. There's a lot of great knowledge in the room today. I've been working in volunteer engagement for quite a long time. I'll go into some of the details a bit later, but a few different organisations, including today, we're going to talk about engaging specifically with students and with youth and trying to use some of the examples of things that people have done to bring that to life. But please pop in the chat your experiences as well. I'm a firm believer that we learn more from each other in these groups than you do just from listening to people talk. So yeah, just really big thanks to Will and Jana for putting this on and looking forward to getting into it.
Thanks so much, Alex, and great to have you on the panel today. Okay, we're going to hear from Alex later, but let me just run through the agenda. This is what we're looking at. When we're talking about student volunteers today, we are going to focus on university students, so higher education, particularly because of the way Community is operating and how we're working with volunteer programs. Particularly next year, we're running a lot of university programs and working with university students. So that's why we're focusing there at the moment. However, if you are looking at engaging high school students, we do have a couple of key partners where they have high school student volunteers that are looking to engage with charities. It's quite difficult. Obviously, we're working with children's checks, police checks. And we want to make sure that the charities are prepared for that. Often you have to have a dedicated high school program as opposed to being able to utilize high school volunteers in your existing programs. If that's an area of interest to you, please just reach out to me individually. We'd love to talk about high school students volunteering. But today, we are focusing on university student volunteers. We're going to be looking at why should you engage with student volunteers. Again, I'm hoping if you're here today, you already think there's something there. It might be hard, it might be challenging, might be joyous, but there's something here about why we should do it and how we can do it better. And we'll talk, how can we do it better by understanding student volunteers, their motivations and pain points. And then we really want to get into the practical of recruitment and engagement of student volunteers. We want to leave you with some practical tips and start some really good discussions. As Alex alluded to, we think it's a really powerful network that we're creating here. We think you all have things that you can add to the conversation, as well as being here to hear about the sector and engage with content, take a moment in the chat. We'd love to know who you are, which organization you're from, what's your role there. I love meeting people who their actual role is volunteer manager. They're like some of my favorite people in the world, closely followed by those who do volunteer management, even though it's not in their role description. So I'd love to hear who you are, where you're from. We'd love to hear what you want to get out of today's session. We have a bit of a question in the registration form that kind of asks, what are your challenges? What are you looking for? But we'd love to hear really what do you want to get out of today's session? Is it do you need to be convinced that it's even worth engaging student volunteers? That's so valid. Have you tried it before and you haven't had success, so you want to understand how to do it better? Or maybe you're already pretty happy with your student volunteer engagement and you're here to see what we have to say, see if there's other tips and tricks for you to keep improving. We'd love to hear who you are, what your role is, what you're looking to get out of it. Hobart City Mission, we love our student volunteers and are looking for more insights. So good to have you, Tegan. So good to have the team here as well. Todd Burns, a familiar face. Good to see you again, Todd. Todd has a wealth of experience in youth engagement as well, and it's good to have you here today, Todd. Keep the introductions coming. Would love to hear who you are and what your expectations are out of the session. Hopefully we meet them. If not, that's totally fine. I'm okay with failure. I'm okay with working again. And we want to keep putting out content that's useful to you. So we want to hear what you're looking for. Without further ado, let's kick off the why. Jana, why should we engage with student volunteers?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Will. Yeah, so we'll kick off with a bit of the why we should be engaging student volunteers, and we'll be kind of talking a little bit about the context of the current student volunteer scene, essentially. Yeah, so before COVID, there was a steady increase in the rate of young volunteers, of student volunteers. But however, as we all know, this growth took a massive hit during the period of COVID, and there's been little to no signs of recovery since, especially for the age group of 18 to 24. In a study done by ANU, the Australian National University, they found that 36.5% of this age group was volunteering in 2021, and it's only gotten back up to 29.7% in 2023. So not quite reaching the levels that we were seeing before COVID-19. As well, in the National Volunteering Strategy by Volunteering Australia, engaging young volunteers was one of the main pain points that was listed as the main barriers for organisations in trying to recruit volunteers and in trying to retain and continuously engage them as well. And that came along with looking for volunteers with available time, which is a very prevalent pain point, especially in student volunteers who are trying to juggle many different commitments and trying to figure out what they want to do in life, essentially, and in finding people that are willing to commit to ongoing volunteering opportunities as well. We've also identified that there are the young cohort are essentially one of the biggest cohorts that can potentially contribute to the future of volunteering and build the national volunteering pool. So around 48% of Gen Zs and 42% of millennials have indicated that they are interested in volunteering in the future. So this is a very engaged pool, or there's a large potential in this pool that we can tap into in looking to engage student volunteers. Yeah, next slide, please, Will. Thank you. So with that, we'll go a little bit further into the benefits of engaging students. And we've got a quote up here from Volunteering Queensland, kind of outlining the general benefits, not only for students, but also for organizations. So we've got our first bolded point there, where young people can provide creativity, enthusiasm, knowledge of technology and fresh perspectives for volunteer involving organizations. And these fresh ideas and perspectives can help come up with creative solutions for problems that these organizations are facing, or just bring a new light into what you're doing to drive towards your missions and your goals within the cause that you're working in. On the other hand, for young volunteers or for student volunteers, they benefit greatly from the opportunity to expand their social and professional network, gain experience in their professional lives and work references as well. So essentially volunteering helps them make sense of the world around them and also helps them strive towards their own personal goals as well. So overall, engaging with student volunteers is a really good way to build towards the sustainability of the volunteering sector. And this can be done by providing positive volunteer experiences, which essentially foster passion for volunteering and drive young individuals towards a lifetime of volunteering. Through this, it creates a more engaged volunteer pool in the future. As we all always say, young people are the future. So yeah, having that value for volunteering really rooted in them will help build towards a pool that your organization and other not-for-profit organizations can work with, ultimately helping continue Australia's strong tradition of volunteering. Next slide. Back to Will.
Thanks, Jana. And I think particularly with Community's vision of volunteering and what we're trying to do, the reason we're so passionate about young people volunteering is we're quite concerned about the future of volunteering in terms of percentages and engagement dropping off. We know that people want to do good. We know that Gen Z is a socially conscious generation, but we're reaching levels where people don't know anyone around them who volunteers and don't know the benefits of volunteering in their community and in society as a whole. So what we want to do, we're really talking about inspiring a love for volunteering in this generation and creating new connections with volunteering that haven't been seen before. A lot of young people know volunteering as something that their parents or even grandparents did, and they associate that there. So how do we, not just what are the benefits of engaging young people for our organization, but for the sector as a whole, how do we increase civic participation in this generation? We know that they're doing a lot online in social activism, but are they aware of the benefits that volunteering can still have in their community? We'll talk a lot about the motivations and pain points a bit later, but this is why we're in this space. We think it's really, really important. But to understand student volunteers, we're going to talk a little bit about this. It's a really vital point in volunteer management. And it's part of our volunteer management essentials training for anyone who's been to that session. We're all about creating person-centered experiences. So really understanding the person that you'll be engaging with. It's really easy to kind of set a process or set ways to engage with a volunteer that don't actually take into account the type of person that you want to engage with. So particularly, and look, we'll refer to a lot of these things. We've got a few quotes here. I'll try and include them in our follow-up email, but if there's anything you're particularly interested in, please let me know. We refer to Volunteer Queensland, Volunteer Australia, and I think even Volunteering Victoria. The state and national peak bodies of volunteering do have a lot of good resources out there. We use a lot of that in putting this information together. A lot of it's based on our experience, but a lot of it is based on the research that's being done in our community. So it's really important. We'll try and pass that on. But if anything interests you, pop it in the chat as well so we can make a note to try and share it specifically. Here from Volunteering Australia, part of the national strategy, these recruitment efforts have to be person-centered, and they have to find a balance between your goals as an organization and the goals of the individuals that we're talking about. So particularly when we think, okay, how do we apply that to student volunteering? And you can take this principle and apply it to any group of volunteer that you're hoping to engage. And that's whether it's a minority group or subsector of the population, or the specific group of the population that you typically work with at the moment. You want to identify the types of people that will resonate with your programs, or that currently resonate with your programs. So one example is I've been working with Habitat for Humanity recently on one of their skilled volunteering projects, and they're doing a data analysis of their database of volunteers. Quite a large organization, good 6,000 volunteers that have come through their international programs over the past couple of years. And they get a lot of traction just because they're big and they're well known, but they want to know, okay, of those 6,000, what do these people have in common? What are these people, why are they being drawn to our programs? What is the person that likes this type of volunteering? What is the person that engages with our volunteering experiences? And they're using that to help drive their marketing approach, how they recruit volunteers, and it will inform their engagement practices as well. And this could be a huge task, and for them it really is. They use Salesforce as a database. They're getting skilled volunteers to come in and check this out. It's going to be a huge task, but I think it'll be really beneficial for them. And we can do it to various extents as well. We've got a small ambassador program that we run at Community with about 15 volunteers who've come through that so far. And we can look at the type of students that are coming through. What do they like? Why have they signed up? We ask them, why did you join? We're happy you're here, but what is it that made you join this program? And by that, you're building a picture of the type of people that engage with your program currently. Or you can say, if we want to engage young people, what are they looking for, and what can we either adapt our current program to, or create a new program based on that. So we've done a little bit of that. We've got some types of students here. This is based on some research into student volunteering as well. But we've got 3 kind of typical student volunteers. And that's the thing about creating these personas, or there's a stereotype. You're trying to create a person with based on their interests, or based on what they're looking for. So we've got this kind of career-focused instrumental volunteer. We often think about these student volunteers who are in the final year or 2 of studies, particularly skilled volunteering or things that will help them progress in their career, is what drives them, and that's what will drive them to engage as well. They'll often pick up kind of every extracurricular activity that they're given at uni. They'll participate in all the programs and try to get around and get as much experience as possible. They're really career focused and driven. You've got your altruistic, value focused, so they're there for the cause. Often this will be because there's a personal relation to the cause, a family member that's gone through something, or a personal connection to the cause raised by the charity, and they're really passionate about that sector or that cause. Or there's social aspects. We find particularly international students at the moment are doing volunteering to meet a wider community, a wider network, and are really loving volunteering with people. And that aspect of doing something together is so valuable. We're all very aware of that. And the reasons we identify these types of students in particular is there are plenty of things out there that will fulfill the career focus, the value focus, the ego driven volunteers. Plenty of things out there that they can turn to. There's also things like we always talk about, what are you competing with for their time in terms of career, TikTok, all that kind of stuff. What are we competing with? And it's good to know. And then how do we create programs that not just meet our needs, but meet these needs as well? We can give you a value, we can support your values whilst also providing social connections with your community. How do we meet those needs in our program? So by creating these personas, by creating a type of person that you're working towards, it'll help refine your communications and the way you run your programs, your recognition. So it's a really important step. With these 3 that we've created, we're going to go a bit into their motivations and pain points. We want to kind of flesh that out a bit, and I'll throw to Jaina to do that.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so as Will mentioned, really understanding what drives each of these types of student volunteers not only helps you understand what they need, but also helps you communicate how your program helps these specific needs or meets these specific needs of these students. And often it can be a mix or a combination of a few of these. But the main ones we've got here, the motivations for each of these are for the instrumental and the career-focused student volunteer. They're looking for something that will help build their career, build their professional experience, for an experience that they can put on their CV when applying for a job or for another course or higher education. They're looking to develop the confidence to understand the professional environments and use their skills. So opportunities like skill volunteering are great ways for them to implement the things that they've learned into real world projects, real world scenarios, and kind of build that that experience in that regard. And the final point there is to network. So they're there to draw upon the experiences of those that they are volunteering with, perhaps those in a position that is what they're trying to strive for, and essentially find a guide to help them strive towards their goals and to help them get to where they want to be professionally. Our next one is the altruistic student volunteer. They are more so value focused. They recognize that it's important to help others, and they're there to give back to the community and to contribute towards a broader cause. They understand that to work for a cause is important, and it is something that they hold important to themselves as well. They're then to gain new perspectives around about the world, about the cause that they're passionate about, and to gain that practical experience in that regard as well, and perhaps to learn a little bit more about the cause. So learning about it will help them kind of get their bearings in figuring out how they can further contribute to create greater impact for their communities. And then the final one, we have our socially driven student volunteer. They are more so ego-driven, and they're more so motivated by the people around them. So they can volunteer in order to make new friends. As Will mentioned, we've got international students volunteering with each other, making new friends basically every single time they go. And once they've found these friends through volunteering, often they continue to volunteer together. They're there to motivate each other to share this experience with each other. And yeah, another driver in this regard can be that it relieves some of the guilt of being more fortunate than others. There is that aspect of giving back as well, and connecting with others as well. Or they might be motivated to volunteer because they were advised to do so by a career advisor or a family member. So that desire to connect with the community also means that they are also motivated by their community and by the people around them as well. Next slide, please. Perfect. And then we'll go into some of the pain points that students, volunteers face. These are quite relevant for all students, regardless of what type of which one they fit into that we've just discussed. So main pain points include financial restrictions to volunteering, whether this be transport or something like that. You've got time priorities for paid work or internships. So many of us understand that students have quite chaotic timetables. They juggle a lot of things. They've got uni, they've got work, whether it be casual work, there's often multiple jobs or internships or work experience opportunities that they're trying to juggle at the same time. So that leads us into our next point, finding volunteering opportunities that fit a causal timetable. They're really looking for flexible volunteering opportunities that they can coordinate along with all the other things that they've got going on. Feeling like they're actually making a difference. So student volunteers need to understand the greater impact that they're creating, and understand how their efforts, how them sacrificing their time makes a difference in the cause that you're working in, or makes a difference even in the organization. How are they helping you, and what are they getting out of this? And that also leads us to our final point as well. Feeling like they're actually making a difference can often be hindered by a lack of training and support. And that's often because if you don't understand the motivations or the needs of these students, no matter what you do, they're going to struggle to feel like they are supported in their volunteering opportunity. Yeah, so those are just a few of the pain points that we commonly see in the student volunteers that we work with. And yeah, understanding these pain points will essentially help you build volunteering programs that not only meet their needs, but also try to alleviate these pain points in order to facilitate a better gateway or pathway into starting their volunteering journey. Yeah.
Thanks, Jana. Yeah, so when we talk about creating these personas, it doesn't have to be a Bible that you live by, or make sure you make every decision by, but it helps you make decisions as you think about your programs and your strategy for recruitment and engagement. So we want to provide some tools or structures to think about that as you think about engaging student volunteers. And something that we cover in Essentials is kind of who could take on this role. One of the experiences that I was talking to someone recently, I love talking about volunteering with strangers, because they're like, you work in volunteering? I want to tell you everything that I think about volunteering. The recent conversation was, I love old people. I wanted to volunteer in aged care, and I dutifully told her it was one of the most needed volunteering sectors, but also most undersupplied by volunteers in Australia at the moment. But she said, well, I never volunteered there because after I reached out, I was interested in companionship, working with people in aged care, and just being there once. I would go every week if I could. And they said, you can visit during visiting hours, during 9 to 5, but not during a lunch break, because that's when we're giving them lunch. And she was like, I work full time and I don't have a flexible lunch break. So you've just ruled out every hour in the day for me in terms of what these are the exact times that I can't volunteer. So you can make those decisions. Well, if I'm going to make this decision, then I can't engage with full-time corporate volunteers or people who are don't have flexibility in their work hours. And by creating personas, those are the kind of decisions that you can make, and it's okay to make that decision if that's the case. But you just need to be aware of the people that you're engaging or disengaging. Even it doesn't have to be too sophisticated. These are kind of some personas that we used early on at Community. We kind of just created people that we could think, would Jenny want to do this? And you can ask those questions by kind of giving them a name, by giving them a face. You can ask those questions, and you can kind of create that persona to ask Jenny those questions about, is this the kind of job you can commit to? Most of the ads on Seek Volunteer at the moment are 6 months or longer. And students at the moment, they work to a 6-month schedule in university, and it changes every 6 months. So what are you asking them to commit to? Those are the kind of questions we want to ask. We've been talking for a while. We'd love to open it up to the floor. We've got another Slido. You can either go to slido.com, put in the numbers, or Olivia's going to send a link in the chat. From what we've been talking about so far, by taking the motivations and pain points into account, what are some tips, and this can be something that you've done before. You can say, this is how I've created a person-centered experience for student volunteers. These are decisions that I've made. Or if you've been inspired in the last kind of 10, 15 minutes in terms of, okay, now that I understand that, this is something that I could do to better engage student volunteers. You can pop in that link. We'd love to see your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you guys. Give you a moment to fill that in. I might call on people to elaborate, so feel free to elaborate or type in a dot point, and you can let us know more about how that went for you, or what that experience was like for you. Thanks for being so engaged in the chat, everyone, as well. It's been great to see those coming through. Yeah, one of the real concerns is, well, we've gone through this student persona. We thought really hard about their motivations and pain points. Do we change our whole program just for the students? Maybe they make up 10% of your volunteering pool at the moment, and your goal is to hit 20%. Can you do that with balancing those two needs? Maybe not. Making sure there's space to be heard. Yeah. Yeah, I think a big one, what do they want to get out of their time spent volunteering, is a really important question to ask, and a great reason to create a persona, and base that persona on asking people, what do you want to get out of volunteering? Regular feedback, working with students. A lot of the pain points can be addressed just by talking to volunteers. And one of the things about how do I balance student volunteering and the rest of my volunteers is that at the end of the day, you're looking to support the people that you work with, whether they're a student or not. And there's some key ways you can do that, even without making holistic change across the organization. So there's some ways to do that. Thanks so much for sharing. Again, I'm going to leave this open, and please keep typing your thoughts in there. I just want to wrap up this session with kind of 3 tips for understanding students and how you can work towards that. We're encouraging you to create a persona. It'd be a great exercise to do this afternoon while you're inspired. Create a persona for the type of student that you want to engage or think you can be engaging. You can use the 3 kind of broader categories that we talked about before, or you could go completely off on your own. That's totally fine. One of a real thing is shift-based volunteering or flexible volunteering, in terms of they're working to a casual roster in every other aspect of their life at the moment, across university, across work. So can we implement that in our volunteering programs? And then 3, it's broad. It's not just for students. Recognize people based on how they feel appreciated. So there's no point giving someone a certificate if they'd rather have valuable input into the program and feel like they're listened to by their leaders and that kind of thing. Certificates are nice, but how do we acknowledge that we know what they want to do to feel appreciated and work with that? These are some practical tips, but I want to invite Alex Connor up, because she has some other great practical tips. She's going to speak to her experience. So I'll bring Alex Connor back up to the spotlight.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Will. I really appreciate all that background and framing to help kind of set the scene for the things that we need to do, and just really clearly setting 3 key things that people can do. So, morning, everybody. Hi, my name's Alex. I've worked in the for-purpose sector now for about 10 years. In that time, I've been involved with a few different programs. And since you're driving, I'm going to be that person that's like, next slide, please. Hopefully that's not too weird. And I've been involved in places like Wahroonga Zoo, the National Breast Cancer Foundation, New South Wales National Parks, and most recently at the University of Technology in Sydney. So that means in that time, I've worked with adult and long-standing volunteering programs, as well as some that are very youth focused. And essentially across all of them, a lot of people have been trying to tackle the youth engagement problem. In that time, I've also worked with students in my role as a facilitator, both for tertiary courses and in university workshops, which means I've actually been able to engage with a really large number of young people and hear direct from them, their experiences and what they've been telling. So that's the perspective I'll be bringing. I think from my personal kind of career perspective, I've really moved my focus into the social impact of volunteering. I personally, like a lot of people in this room, find some frustration with volunteering being viewed as a transactional function, and wanted to focus on the impact of people power and clearly articulating how that can deliver on our sustainability and social change goals for this decade. And I think when we look at engaging young people in our work and we give ourselves permission to step back into that space, it gives us freedom to be a little bit more innovative and creative in the way that we do things, but also acknowledging that that's hard when you're under-resourced and all the other things. So for the content that I'll be kind of covering today, I'm going to try and start with some of those actionable tips, looking at the stuff that you guys submitted. Some of you are really keen to just go, look, what can I do today? What's the quick thing that I can consider? So we're going to go through some of those on recruitment, program structure, and engagement. And then I'll be towards the end looking at some of those bigger ideas behind that. Again, I want to acknowledge there is a lot of skills, knowledge, and experience in this room. So, you know, please share what you've done. It's very different in different contexts. So please drop that in the chat or raise your hand and those kinds of things. So first thing I'd like to do is head to the next slide. And when we're looking at our student volunteers and our personas, I want to challenge us to think about who is a student. Now, I'm not going to make you raise your hand, but I would be curious to know how many people on this call are like myself, over 30. We're not going to discuss any further. But if you are over 30, your understanding of what it is to be a student volunteer may come from when you were a student. And it's important to acknowledge that that student life and experience is quite different now. The idea of having months of free time over summer, or if you're a university student, or those kinds of things are very different. So when it comes to university students at the moment, there is the domestic high school leaver, might be the person you initially think of, 18 to 25, doesn't have a lot of experience yet, maybe enthusiastic, wanting to, you know, knowledge and experience build. But there are also a lot of students at the moment that are international master's students. These are the ones that tend to be, so across these 4 personas, they tend to be students who are very interested in volunteering. So that's why we're highlighting them. But we've got our domestic high school leavers. We have a lot of international students who are at master's level, who have slightly different needs, but they're very keen to understand the Australian context and to work with Australian for-purpose organisations. We have the final year transition student whose needs are going to be very different. So if you're looking at that early stage, people are wanting fun, social, then that more egoistic volunteer. And that final year transition is going to be very practically about how do I get that job? One of the reasons I highlight these two is that in universities, these two levels, that in first year or final year, tend to be when students are most engaged in volunteering and extracurricular activities. They're a great student group to target or consider when you're looking at who you want to work with. And the last student I want to mention is the professional career developer. Now, a lot of universities have actually switched their business models into a lifetime of learning. So that means these people who are older are going to keep going back to university, and they're going to be looking for new experiences to volunteer, to figure out how they're going to round out this growth phase of their life, practice new skills. So these are all the kind of students we want to consider when we're looking at student volunteering. And as Will mentioned, we cannot forget the high school students. We know that engaging students at high school level is much more likely to be a predictor of whether they volunteer for the rest of their lives. So we know they're a very important group to engage, but for today, I'm focusing on these guys just because that's where my experience aligns a bit better. So if we head to the next slide, let's get into some practicalities, things that people most ask about: recruitment, how to structure things, and how do we engage. So if you're looking at university recruitment, general rule is you want to align to whatever TAFE, university, tertiary institution timetable that you can. So as a general rule, February, March, and June, July are peak because people are coming in for their new year, new semester. They're excited, they're planning. That's when they're going to want to talk to you. They're going to want to get involved. And the faster you can get them on the ground at this time, the better, the more likely they are to engage. If you start recruiting in their first week of semester and then don't get them started volunteering until week 4 or 5, you're really missing out on that peak time when they want to do work for you. If you've got a great program that's super youth focused, it's going to be amazing, but you launch it mid-semester or toward exam period, you're going to find that you don't get any engagement and wonder, what did we do wrong? It can be something as simple as when you time it. So you could partner with an organization that is working with students, or you could just go to whatever your local institution is if you want to have a place-based approach and get them to support your recruitment. Another thing is to be really, like, almost painfully clear about the time commitment. What exactly are we asking you to do? When do we want you somewhere? What would the tasks going to be? What are the skills you're either going to use or learn? And how are you going to be recognized? This is so important because, to Will's point earlier, there's a curation problem. We are all bombarded with so much information all the time. People are just like, just give it to me straight. What do you want me to do? What does it mean? And the interesting benefit of that is actually that it forces us as the coordinator to think, oh, what do we really want them to do? What recognition do we want to give them before they even get on site or get involved? You can see I've got in the slide here an example of a program that the SOL Award, which is a leadership development program at UTS runs, which is an opportunity accelerator that very clearly has laid that out. And what we found when we were running this program is that we got huge engagement from this as compared to a fortnightly newsletter of curated experiences. There was just something about saying really clearly, this is for you, this is what it means, that completely changed the engagement rate right off the bat. So the other thing I would say for that clarity and recruitment is do try to consider some kind of application process. Have a commitment to timing, maybe opening and closing dates as opposed to always on. It works much better. But don't have a just email us here or send us your CV, because you will get very random emails at very random times. And if you're looking to engage international students, what we know about them is that they're passionate, they want to work with you, but they're learning a new country, they're studying, and they're also learning professional norms. So they actually don't just email me your CV is actually so open that they don't know how to do it well, and you might get things that are overly formal or overly forward, or they're still learning this stuff and it's enough to put them off. So you can be missing really good quality students just with that. Just email me a CV instead of having a little bit more guidance. So some of the other stuff which I know can be tricky to do, but reducing costs is really important. You'd be surprised. I'm running workshops at the university. I ran some this year actually, and we found students taking, you always have catering and you take food home and this, that, and the other, but we found students taking a lot of food and putting them in their bags, or taking free t-shirts at a much higher rate. And not to shame anyone, but just, to acknowledge that some students are really struggling, and they still want to volunteer. They still want to, support themselves, support their families. They're juggling so much. All of these little things you can do to just reimburse transport, just to make it that little bit less of a barrier to engage with you. It's a sad state of affairs, the cost of living this year. Hopefully it gets better. There are university scholarships, there are funding you can get, but it's just to acknowledge that's the state that we're in, and just be super grateful for what people are trying to commit. It's kind of incredible. So when you're recruiting, you're advertising on your website, no one's talking to you. Why? And I could say things like, go on social media, go on Facebook, start a TikTok account. I do personally love TikTok, despite their ethical conundrums, but it's got me hooked. It's not necessarily right for everyone. One of the best things you can do is do something to become a trusted source or partner. So there could be things about simple things like talking to the volunteers that you have and having a bring a friend referral. Personal referrals are hugely effective. Going back to that kind of structure, connect to a local uni, a local school, a community group, and explain what you're doing, and have them send stuff out on your behalf to say, we've scanned this as your lecturer, we've scanned this as your teacher, and said, we think this really aligns with what you're doing. You will get much, much further in that process just by becoming a bit more trusted, rather than just being this blast that's out to the world. Another way is to actually have your students share their stories, or your current youth volunteers share their stories, so people can see, oh, that person's just like me. They made this work and they got something really good out of it. Actually, maybe this is for me. So all those little things. Using your, just wanted to make sure I'm covering, and making sure that you lead with those benefits. Is it a social experience? Is it a work experience? Or is it something else? I think sometimes knowing where you want to place this program, or where you want to place this activity, can really help you get the people that are actually going to want to do it. And I'm going to talk about that a bit more later on. And the last thing really is to just highlight how this role fits them. How does it work for that young person? So even if it's, we're looking for people with this skill set, we're looking for people who are interested in developing into this industry. One of the most successful blasts I've seen an organization have was they'd started a different kind of program and said, we know the biggest challenge for you when it comes to volunteering is time and finding the role that fits for you. This role is 2 weeks long. This has been specifically designed with students in mind. This is to develop these skills and get this out of it. Huge uptake. So just these little tweaks can support. Will, I might say next slide. So the next thing is, if you're going to recruit people, you've got to have the structure to make it work. And as we were talking about, the pie chart at the bottom are the roles that are available on Seek Volunteer. It's just from their report last year. They've just released a new one. Really interesting stats on what's happening in the sector. And you can see that most students won't commit to a 6-month or longer role, not because they're not interested, because they're actually afraid of letting people down and they don't know what their timetable is going to be. It's interesting how much of this is actually out of kindness rather than unreliability, because there's that myth out there that students are all unreliable. But over 75% are over 6 months long. So we can tell that we're missing them. So when you're looking at structures, try to do something 3 months or less. And I can hear people in the crowd going, great, if I wanted to, if I could do that, I would have done it already. But it may be about getting innovative and creating new ways of thinking about it. So I've got a picture here from many years ago, and I think there's a couple of people on the call who might be familiar with Taronga's dinosaur program, but it was very interesting. So at Taronga Zoo, they had a 30-year volunteer program, very long structured, weekly commitments, and they'd actually been able to structure the programs in different ways. They had the guest services experience that mainly attracted retirees who wanted to come in once a week and develop a long-term connection. They had their zookeeper program, which was focused on skill development, and lots of young people wanted to come in to do that work to get jobs, but also stayed on with the organisation, attract a lot of different types. But getting young people involved in that public-facing space was really difficult. So when the exhibition came in, where they were going to have dinosaurs, giant animatronic dinosaurs at the zoo for over summer, rather than replicating the existing program or pushing existing volunteers into that structure, they said, what can we do differently? So they decided to create a 3-month dinosaur volunteering program. So there was a set structure to it. There was specific training available around public interaction. So this was one of the dinosaur guides that actually emailed in to be involved, who was 13 and actually became a hired paid staff member as a dinosaur guide. But what they saw was that they got a huge influx of different kinds of people because of a slightly different structure. And then they were able to offer to those people to transition into the ongoing program, or just say, thank you so much, this was great. And they had all of these ambassadors and advocates for their work who went out into lots of different industries. So it's kind of seeing about how these new things where you can test and play and go from there. So making sure in your structure that you can try and go 3 months less. There are some organizations that have success with 4-week trial periods. So for a month, come along with a big group of people, try us out for 4 weeks, no harm, and then we'll let you know what happens at the end. So just different ways of thinking. Anywhere that you can give opportunity to grow, or a set structure where you will start at this level, if you do this, you'll get access to this, you get access to that. It's not just for motivation, but for essentially seeing how there's like recognition and a trust of, what's the word? Responsibility. If I'm here for ages, I'm not going to be treated the same the whole time. As I learn and develop, I'll be trusted with more responsibility, and that's really important. Big structural thing for me, go online. If you can work remotely, you can volunteer remotely. So I just really want to encourage everyone to not be afraid of going online. Young people are very used to working online. They do a lot of their assignments online, and it gives them the opportunity to do work for you out of hours. So it's a really important thing to consider. Another one I wanted to mention was trying to, in your structure, reduce the stress and overwhelm of trying something new. So getting students to, or young people to volunteer in pairs or join small teams, at least at the beginning, makes a massive difference to their continued engagement. We know that during COVID, a lot of people got pushed online. We lost a lot of our connections. And if you can think back to before you've worked a job before or been in an environment before, turning up to that first day can be quite intimidating. So little things like saying, okay, I'm going to have people come in pairs, form buddy groups, volunteer in small teams, have a WhatsApp chat before they arrive where they can all ask the silly questions like where's the train and all those kind of things. Just stuff to reduce stress and increase that little bit of support will increase that engagement. And the last thing with your structure is you might want to link it to learning. So I know that some people have done volunteer placements and internships, can be really stressful. And then looking at ways to look at those placements and make them successful. So if you are going to take on a student placement, set milestones at the beginning, including weekly check-ins. Sounds really simple, but just making sure that at the beginning you've set that up. The amount of placements I've seen where a student's gone into an organization and for the first 6 weeks hasn't really emailed, the organization's waiting for them to kick something off, and then nothing happens, and then it's near the end and everyone's panicking. So just giving yourself permission to help give them some accountability, because they actually don't know what they don't know. And so being able to set that really early on can really help. So Will, if you can just go next slide. The last thing is engagement. So we want to connect to impact, and it doesn't just have to be the impact of your organization more broadly. You can talk about the SDGs, you can talk about social impact. These are really motivating for young people who really want to be part of something bigger because they're in a world that's very stressful and they want to see how they can connect. But it may even just be impact on the person next to them at the organization, the specific end user. Anything that you can show that your being here meant that this thing happened that couldn't have happened otherwise is perfect. Just we forget that sometimes it can be so simple. Another one is to recognize with responsibility, giving them access. So the reason I have this here is I've got a highlight of the Big Lift, which is a student society. There's lots of student societies that you can work with. The Big Lift is completely student run. completely student organized, and they take students out on mini one-day volunteering experiences in the local community, but they take a busload of students into rural New South Wales for, I think, 10 days, once or twice a year. And what's interesting about that is that they coordinate it all themselves, they make all the partnership connections themselves, they work on it themselves. And if you think about the level of motivation, organization, and skill required to pull that off when they're all volunteers, kind of shows you how engaged they want to be versus where they feel like they can be in traditional structures. So there's just something really interesting about giving responsibility. The Australian Conservation Foundation had a great program where they said, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is who we're trying to engage in the local community. Can you create a campaign and be your local community champion for us? So then they could do it on their own. So considering, recognizing responsibility, giving them more power to lead. Have a welcoming environment. I think there's something about, if you're going to bring on youth volunteers, you have to prepare your other volunteers and staff to actually bring them in. And it can be really, really hard because people have preconceived notions and structures. There's a bit of change management that has to happen. And then looking at raising their profile. Add them on LinkedIn, network, introduce them to people. We've got the state awards here, nominate them for awards. This not only helps recognize them, but it helps bring other students who see this is a great experience. I really want to be involved. So we'll head to the next slide. So this is the big idea behind it. I think, you know, all these little tips and tricks, you'd be like, that works for me, that doesn't work for me. But essentially what I want you to think about is how you might be able to structure it. And I like to think that if you're going to engage young people, have 3 levels to it. Have something really broad and supported, like an event day, a fundraising event, something that, you know, they can come along in groups, they can start their volunteering journey. Then look at something a bit more structured and ongoing. What might be a way for them to get involved, you know, longer term, things that where you've picked out people from that broad one that have a real interest, and then move on to the high investment and return. Super skilled, takes a lot more time from your staff, but you know that you're going to get a much better return. And that might be engaging with internships, specific projects and programs. So have that staged and great engagement, be really selfish about what you need for your organization, because if it's delivering for you, it delivers meaning for them. So don't just make stuff because you think it's fluffy and fun. You have a right to be selfish. And build a program with an asset-based lens. So essentially thinking about what are the assets these students can bring, how can we turn those up? So I could go all day, and I probably would if you let me. So I'm going to pull it back down. I was looking at considering programmatic or campaign style structures, but I know that Will's actually going to talk about a programming campaign that Community is running. So considering that as an example of different ways that you might be able to engage with student volunteers. So with that, I will hand back to Will. And I hope that that was slightly useful. I'll be staying on the call for a while afterwards if you want to have a chat.
Thanks so much, Alex. Really appreciate your insights. And as we near to 12 o'clock, we'll be wrapping up soon. I just want to provide some support. This is what Community is working on at the moment. So again, one of the reasons we're focusing on university students is we've recently been funded by the federal government to engage student volunteers, 18 to 25 in particular. And we're running a national youth initiative. We want young people to fall in love with volunteering. That's our kind of motto for 2024. We have these 3 programs: Local Legends, Young Changemakers, Community Leaders, where we're trying to engage young people in different areas. They're basically built around those 3 kind of personas or 3 areas that students are interested in. We've got a link. If you're interested in engaging student volunteers and working with students, we've got a link to express interest. We're just looking for charities that we can work with, particularly for these student programs. So we'd love to hear about it. It's a pretty extensive form compared to what we normally have, but we can really get in touch in terms of what's involved in the programs and how we support you or how we connect you to students. So I think Liv's going to send that form in the chat in a moment. It'll also be in the follow-up email. So please keep in touch. We're keen to hear about what you're doing in this space and how we can work with you. But it's a really exciting initiative when we're looking for charities who are looking to engage student volunteers in particular. But look, thanks so much for today. I know it's 12 o'clock, so if you need to head off, you're more than welcome to. Thanks for joining us. As Alex said, we'll be sticking around. I like to call them the fireside chats, where we can have a bit of Q&A, talk a bit about student volunteering, the space at the moment. I hope it was insightful and that you feel inspired to improve your practice, to keep working towards engaging volunteers better, whether students or not. But thanks for joining us today. Thanks, Alex, for your 15 minutes. It was really, really powerful, and it's great to hear your experience. But thanks so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to come off mute and we can have a chat. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jemima. I'm going to stop spotlighting myself so we can see everyone who's sticking around. Awesome. Any questions, feel free to raise your hands like Todd has done. Todd, good to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. I just wanted to, if you can, let us know how the hackathon went.
Thanks, Todd. For those who weren't in the know, we recently ran a student event with UNSW with about 40, 50 students. So we worked with Red Cross and Ronald McDonald House Charities Sydney, where it was a full day ideation event. So they provided business problems that the students could work on throughout the day and provide and work on solutions to it. It was kind of a structured volunteer program for the day. Awesome event, really successful. Students loved it. We try to implement a lot of what we've got there. The recognition, the rewards were kind of internships with each of the charities, and we had kind of prizes we had CommBank involved as well, providing facilitation and mentoring as part of the day. So stunning day, really good to have Red Cross on board, and the students got a lot out of it, and the charity representatives thought it was a really powerful day as well. It was really good. Thanks, Todd. Kylie.
Yep, thank you. Todd actually had one of my questions, so I just wanted to also, find out a bit of how that went. But I just wanted to find out, going over your slideshow, when you sort of had the different volunteers, I guess, career-focused, value-focused, ego-driven, I just wanted to find out if you had done any research or any feedback on terms of if you've been able to work out a commitment time frame that each would have, if that makes sense. So just depending on the volunteer and what they're wanting to get out of it, how much length of time they would commit to volunteering.
Yeah, that's great. And Alex, I don't know if you have any insights into this. We don't have research on it. We haven't, or at least I haven't read any in what we talked about there. One of the real issues is that, and I think someone mentioned this, with student volunteering, they're particularly the career-driven ones who are in the final year or two, they're about to undergo a large life change in the next year or two. So when we think about how long are they going to be able to volunteer, they're going to have to reassess, even if they do get involved for a year or two, they're going to have to reassess their time or how they volunteer in that time frame. One of the benefits of, or one of the things we wanted to take into consideration were those kind of 3-month blocks or shorter periods where you engage for a set period of time, and then you discuss what it looks like to work with them long term, and you can have flexibility there. And that's one of the reasons, so that you can reassess and have those conversations and set expectations. But I don't know about if there's a specific time frame that they're able to volunteer for. I know there's some research out there. I could have a look at it and get back to you. Alex, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think just the same. The career focused ones, if they're early, it depends on where they are in their degree. If they're early year, they might stay with you if they can see growth and a lot of, things that they can put in their portfolio and that kind of thing. The altruistic ones do also feel very, like the social ones, I think actually feel very like linked to location and time. If it's a good social thing, then it's around where they're living. They could stay for years if they feel like there's a community there, but it depends on if they're moving around or that kind of thing. So I do feel like the altruistic and the ego, you'll probably have longer commitments, but the career focus are going to want to usually do more hours with you over a shorter period of time. So it kind of depends on what you're actually needing.
One of the things, even with the altruistic and social type volunteers, the very Gen Z aspect is I want this experience and I'd rather volunteer for 6 months at a time for 6 charities across the next 3 years than the one charity for 3 years. So that's one of the things where we might have to shift our focus. And I was thinking similarly as I was reading this morning about the 4-day work week, in terms of employers have to think, well, if this is what people want, how do we re-understand what the work life means? Maybe we do need to just brace for, instead of finding the volunteers who are going to stick with us for the next 30 years like they would at a surf lifesaving club back in the day, we need to just expect that we're going to have rolling turnover for 6 months at a time. So it's one of those, the shape of volunteering is going to look very different. But yeah, thanks for the question, Kylie. Really helpful. Penelope, I noticed you came off mute earlier. Did you have a question as well?
Yeah, sorry. We're in a shared space, so it's a bit noisy here. My question was really around the hackathon. So we're literally flooded with student requests for people looking for work in the industry. It's animals, so it's a lot of people transitioning careers, but also students. So, and I'm talking about thousands, and I've literally only got 50 roles at a time that I can. So part of our problem is the fact that I guess internally we just don't have the resourcing to support short-term volunteers in the way that we can if we've got 50, 60-year-olds who can stay with us a couple of years. That's our biggest challenge. So we do have a lot of youth volunteers and the impact they make is amazing, and often they get poached by our staff to actually come on board as in jobs, which is fantastic. It's a good transition for us as well. But my question was more about looking at what sort of roles we can put young people into in terms of advisory sort of roles or things that are going to help benefit the organisation in other ways. I'm interested in the hackathon that you were talking about, and what sort of organisational questions you asked young people as opposed to more of a corporate hackathon sort of role, how they were able to get involved in that space and what the benefits are of that sort of level of work. Is that something that you can share?
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Penelope, and love to hear it. I think there's 2 areas in Australia at the moment that are oversubscribed with volunteers, and that's large sporting events and people who work in animal care and that kind of thing. So I'm sure there's a lot of jealous VIOs out there. Thousands of volunteers, that would be crazy. Feel free to, we can talk about that. But in terms of the hackathon, so we work closely with our charities to help develop a problem statement, whether it's corporate or student hackathons. With the students, so we do try to, with UNSW, we had the business faculty. So all the students were from the business faculty, and we could design a question that was related to at least the area that they were able to work in. One of the things is that we work with even like in Canberra, we're talking about a youth ambassador program, and we're talking about how do you utilize the skills of young people to create a new resource. Like a lot of our charities, if they had 50 student volunteers, they could do something with 50 volunteers, but if they don't have it, they're not going to create something. So we're playing that kind of chicken and the egg game. So the space that you have is we could work together, and we're happy to work with you on this. We kind of provide consultations for our charities to help develop either a problem statement or areas that volunteers can support you in. So in terms of the structures that we went for the hackathon, it's really, can you create as much context to the current state as possible? So how can you help the students understand what is happening right now? What have you tried before? And what are the areas for growth? We had to really ask the charities multiple times, what do you think the students could take? Where could they take this? What directions could they take? If you don't really understand what you're actually looking for out of it, then it's probably not clear enough of a problem statement or an area. You don't have to solve it yourself, but you have to be like, if the students it could look like this, or a solution could look like that. So whether that's a problem statement, whether that's putting together a youth advisory board, you could work with 10, 20 students to think about, can you create fundraising models or campaigns to engage the other students who aren't able to come into your volunteering roles. And there's ways to utilize student volunteers in different ways. Is this similar to what you faced at Taronga, Alex, Connor? Any similarities?
I mean, it's all the same, but also I think there's I don't want to drop Tegan in it, but she used to work at Taronga as well and did a lot more time on the youth issues. But yeah, it is a lot of that same challenge. How do you frame it? Taronga didn't go down the advisory group route, which I think is actually a really smart way to engage young people going forward and trying to get youth voice and user voice involved in what you do. It's just about trying to find the structure that works. I think that's a really good way for the future. But yeah, might leave it at that for now, unless Tegan wants to drop in any thoughts.
Thanks. I'm just going to give a plug for student advisory bodies. If you care about students, get a student voice into your organisation. Really powerful. Great question, Penelope. Did you any follow-up questions? Was that helpful?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you. That actually, the using them in the fundraising space, that's actually quite a good space. That there'd be some synergy there. So I'll have to think about that. We're still, my team's new. We're still building a lot of change as the organisation. So this is a space we're going to look at, for future. But it's just good to get some ideas. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Get in quick. A lot of charities are moving to this advisory body and ambassador programs. Movember started it this year as well. I don't think I saw it last year, where you can become an ambassador in your university or in your school. Get in quick, otherwise there'll be too many ambassador programs to choose from. Be one of the first. Mary, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you. A very, very helpful presentation. I got lots of tips from it. Thank you. We are all volunteers and we run a website. So the volunteer work I need is entirely online, and it could be somebody remote anywhere as long as they've got internet. Is Seek Volunteer the best place to advertise, or is it best to advertise with each individual student body?
Alex, do you have an answer to that? Is that
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that one. Hi, Mary. I just wanted to ask, as far as the website work goes, is it already? Because I only ask because I've had so many people contact university students to work on websites, and it very rarely comes out well. So I guess I'm trying to ask you the tricky question first. So is it that you guys already know how to maintain the website, you know everything about it, you just need to give someone like basic instructions, or is it a bit more than that?
I wasn't very clear. We've got a website. We're pretty sorted. We've been doing it for years. I'm 81. I've managed it, so anyone can. And what we want is a person who will interview a couple of local groups and get a story about them, and then write that article and put it on the website. And then someone else who might point to the latest 3 stories and compile a little newsletter and send that out. That kind of work.
Yeah, cool. So I think that the key there is that when talking to young people, that would be called content production. So you're going to want to target.
I've got to learn the jargon.
Yeah, you're going to want to target communication students, journalism students, those kinds of things. As far as where to advertise, I mean, look at the background. I'm obviously going to say put it on Community so we can connect you with our uni partners. But also Career Hub. There's a website called Career Hub, which most universities use as their internal recruitment website. So Seek Volunteer is really good. You'll probably reach a lot of people that way. If you specifically want to reach university students, getting into Career Hub can be helpful. But I think there is something about those big jobs boards are those big broad blasts to anyone in the community. So you might not necessarily get a student or a young person. So either going through Community, or if you have a local uni you want to work with and talking to their careers department, getting referred to the right people, so that then hopefully your ad gets put somewhere prominent in front of the right eyes. to try and save you a lot of pain, I guess, for want of a better term.
Thank you. If I can go through community, yeah, that sounds good.
Well,
We'll
yeah,
do that.
if we can save you some pain, we want to, for sure.
Thanks.
Great, thanks, Mary. Any other questions or anything that you feel like sharing with the group? Awesome. Oh, Todd. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for community's help, not only with the hackathon, but also with our Uber clothing drive campaign. We had a huge amount of volunteers to turn up to support that. Lots of them younger volunteers, and we had massive success with it in terms of how many pieces of clothing and accessories we were able to collect to go into our retail stores to then raise money for our humanitarian programs. So that was just something I wanted to mention, and just thank you for the part that community played in that as well.
Todd, thanks so much for sharing. It brought joy to my heart this morning. Great event, great initiative. I got on the Uber donation as well from my place. It was so convenient, cool. So good. And glad to hear that the volunteering went well throughout the day.
And just another thing I wanted to mention too, for everyone else's benefit and interest, is that I don't know who saw this, but there was a social media stunt that was done where there was pictures of Bondi Beach, like a news presentation of Bondi Beach with all these clothes spread across the whole beach. And that got, I can't remember the exact figures, like 1-point-something million views, because it was all done with AI to make it look like, you know, Bondi Beach is covered in clothes and what's happening here. But just wanted to mention that it was a very successful way of highlighting the story.
Really cool, and great to hear the success of it as well. Thanks, Todd, and thanks everyone for joining us. We might wrap it up there. Yes, there'll be a recording and slides sent out following this session. But thanks so much for joining us and being here live for it. It was always a pleasure to hear from how people are finding volunteer management and what the pain points are and how we can work with you to support you. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.